the music stopped. Not gradually. Not at the end of a song. It stopped in the middle of a sold-out concert, with 10,000 people watching. Marcus Vail stood frozen at the center of the stage. Just seconds earlier, he had been laughing, teasing a woman in the front row. The crowd thought it was hilarious. Marcus did too, until someone backstage started shouting through his earpiece. 3 words. "Marcus, stop talking." The singer blinked, confused. The audience waited for the punchline. But there wasn't one. Because in that exact moment, something strange was happening behind the curtain. A stage manager had just recognized the woman sitting under the spotlight, and the color drained from his face. He leaned toward the monitor, staring harder. Because if he was right, Marcus Vail had just mocked the wrong person. Very wrong. Out in the crowd, the woman sat quietly in her seat, with a calm expression as thousands of eyes turned toward her. Marcus chuckled nervously into the microphone. He thought the moment was harmless. Just another joke. Just another fan. But what he didn't know was that the quiet woman sitting in the front row had once stood on stages far bigger than this one. Stages where people like Marcus Vail had begged for her approval. And before the night was over, the entire arena would realize something Marcus had no idea about. But to understand how a simple joke turned into the most unforgettable moment of that concert tour, you have to look at the moment no one noticed. The moment she first walked into the theater. Because long before the spotlight found her, she had already decided something. And when the music finally started, everything changed. Hours before the concert, before the lights, before the laughter, before the moment that would silence an entire arena, the theater stood quietly beneath the fading glow of a late afternoon sky. Outside, the line of fans already stretched halfway down the block. Some clutched posters. Others wore tour merchandise with Marcus Vail's name printed across the front. They laughed, took photos, and checked their phones as the anticipation built. Marcus Vail concerts had become something of a spectacle. Not just because of the music, but because Marcus himself had a reputation. He wasn't the kind of performer who stayed safely behind the microphone. Marcus joked with the crowd, teased people in the front row, pulled fans onto the stage. Sometimes he even improvised entire moments that later went viral online. That unpredictability was part of the brand. Fans loved it. And tonight, the arena expected nothing less. But among the hundreds of excited voices waiting outside those doors, one person stood quietly apart from the energy around her. Her name was Eleanor Hayes. And if anyone in that crowd had looked closely enough, they might have noticed something unusual. Not in her clothes, not in the way she walked, but in the way she watched everything around her. Calm, observant. Eleanor stood near the edge of the sidewalk, her dark coat folded neatly over one arm. The evening air carried the smell of roasted peanuts from a nearby vendor. A group of college students walked past her, laughing loudly. "Front row tickets," one of them said proudly. "I can't believe we got them." His friend shook her head. "You better not lose your voice screaming tonight." They disappeared into the growing line. Eleanor smiled faintly. She had heard that kind of excitement many times before. But not for a long time. Because once upon a time, concert crowds had looked very different from where she stood now. Once upon a time, the spotlight had belonged to her. But that had been years ago. Years before Marcus Vail became a household name. Years before his songs dominated streaming charts and filled arenas like this one. Back then, Eleanor had made a quiet decision. A decision that slowly pulled her away from the stages where thousands of people once waited for her voice. Most people didn't remember that part of history anymore. And Eleanor preferred it that way. Inside the theater lobby, ushers were beginning to scan tickets. The line slowly moved forward. Excited voices echoed across marble floors as fans stepped inside. When Eleanor finally reached the entrance, a young usher greeted her politely. "Good evening," he said. "May I see your ticket?" Eleanor handed him the printed slip. He scanned it quickly. For a moment, his expression changed. Just slightly. Then he looked back at her. "In the front section," he said. Eleanor nodded calmly, "Yes." He handed the ticket back. "Well, enjoy the show." "Thank you." She stepped inside. The theater interior was already alive with energy. Fans took photos of the stage. Some hurried to merchandise stands. Others simply stared at the enormous lighting rig suspended above the performance area. But Eleanor didn't linger in the lobby. She walked directly toward the auditorium doors. Inside, the stage stretched across the far end of the room beneath towering speakers and massive LED screens. Technicians moved across the stage making final adjustments to microphones and instruments. The house lights glowed softly over rows of red velvet seats. Eleanor checked her ticket again. Row A, seat 7. Front row. A group of teenagers nearby noticed the seat number. "Whoa," one of them whispered. "That's basically on the stage." Another laughed. "You're lucky if Marcus doesn't pull you up there." Eleanor said nothing. She simply walked down the aisle, each step bringing her closer to the stage, closer to the place where Marcus Vale would soon command the entire room. A young woman sitting in seat 6 looked up when Eleanor approached. "Oh, sorry," she said quickly, standing to let her pass. Eleanor nodded politely. "Thank you." She sat down carefully and placed her purse beneath the seat. From here, the stage felt almost close enough to touch. Fans around her were already buzzing with excitement. Two girls a few seats away leaned toward each other. "Do you think he'll sing Forever Tonight?" one asked. "He has to," the other replied immediately. "That's the song that made him famous." Eleanor listened quietly, because she remembered something those fans didn't know. That song had almost never been recorded. Years earlier, Marcus Vale had nearly abandoned it after struggling to find the right arrangement, until someone behind the scenes had suggested a small change, a small adjustment to the melody, one that transformed the song entirely. That suggestion had come from someone whose name most fans would never recognize. Someone who had once spent years shaping the sound of artists like Marcus. But again, that had been a long time ago. Eleanor folded her hands calmly in her lap. Around her, the crowd continued to grow. Every seat slowly filled. Backstage, the atmosphere felt very different. Technicians moved quickly between equipment racks. Crew members checked headset connections. A stage manager named Daniel Cruz walked briskly down the hallway with a clipboard tucked under his arm. "Sound check is locked," someone said over his headset. "Lighting ready," another voice responded. Daniel glanced at the stage monitor mounted on the wall. The front row camera feed showed the audience settling into their seats. Nothing unusual, just excited fans waiting for the show. He checked his watch. 30 minutes to curtain. Marcus Vale was already warming up in his dressing room down the hall. The singer had a reputation for improvising during performances, which meant Daniel had learned to watch the crowd carefully. Sometimes Marcus spotted someone interesting in the audience and turned it into a moment. Sometimes it was hilarious. Sometimes it was chaotic. Either way, the crew had to be ready. Daniel scribbled a note on his clipboard, then glanced back toward the monitor again. The front row camera had shifted slightly, scanning across the audience. Fans waving at the camera, people laughing, someone holding a sign. And then, for just a moment, the camera passed over Eleanor Hayes. Daniel didn't react yet, because at first glance, she looked like any other guest. A quiet woman sitting calmly while the crowd buzzed around her. The camera moved on. Daniel returned his attention to the checklist in front of him. But something nagged at the edge of his mind. A small detail he couldn't quite place. He frowned slightly, then looked back up at the monitor. But the camera had already moved to another section of the audience. Daniel shrugged it off. Probably nothing. After all, tonight was just another concert. Another crowd. Another performance. Perlis. That's what everyone believed. Because in less than 2 hours, Marcus Vale would notice the quiet woman sitting in the front row and make her part of the show. A decision that seemed harmless in the moment, until someone backstage realized who she was and tried to stop it before it was too late. But by the time that realization arrived, the spotlight would already be shining directly on her, and thousands of people would be watching, waiting to see what happened next. By the time the lights dimmed inside the theater, the energy in the room had shifted completely. What had once been scattered excitement in the lobby had now condensed into something electric. Thousands of people sat shoulder to shoulder, waiting. Phones lifted. Cameras ready. Every eye fixed on the stage. For several seconds, the theater remained in darkness. Then suddenly, a single beam of white light cut through the room. The crowd erupted. Music thundered through the speakers as the band stepped onto the stage one by one. Drums, guitar, keyboard, and finally, Marcus Vail. The cheers that followed felt almost physical. Marcus stepped into the spotlight like a man who had done this 1,000 times. Which he had. He raised one hand toward the audience and grinned. "Well," he said into the microphone. "Chicago, you look loud tonight." The crowd roared. Marcus laughed. "That's what I like to hear." Behind him, the band launched into the opening chords of the first song. The arena pulsed with energy as Marcus moved effortlessly across the stage, his voice filling every corner of the theater. From the front row, Eleanor Hayes watched quietly. She didn't clap wildly like the others around her. She didn't stand. She simply observed attentively, like someone studying the performance rather than being carried away by it. But that didn't mean she wasn't enjoying the music. In fact, she listened more closely than anyone else in the room. Because Eleanor could hear things most fans never noticed. Subtle shifts in vocal control. Small timing differences in the band. Moments when Marcus slightly adjusted the melody. Things only someone deeply familiar with the craft would recognize. And Marcus was good. Very good. Song after song flowed seamlessly as the show built momentum. Fans sang along. Some stood and danced. Others held up phones, capturing the moment. Marcus thrived on the energy. Between songs, he joked with the crowd. "All right," he said at one point, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I need to know something." He pointed toward a section of seats near the balcony. "Who here has seen this tour already?" A few people cheered. Marcus grinned. "Okay, and who here is seeing me for the first time tonight?" Half the arena exploded with applause. Marcus laughed. "Perfect. That means I can still pretend I'm impressive." The audience loved it. That was Marcus's secret weapon. He made even massive arenas feel like intimate rooms. Like he was speaking directly to individual people. Sometimes he even singled someone out. A birthday. A funny sign. A dancing couple. Those spontaneous moments became highlights of his shows. And tonight would be no different. But the moment he chose to create would not unfold the way he expected. 40 minutes into the concert, Marcus stepped toward the edge of the stage. The band eased into a softer rhythm behind him. Marcus scanned the audience. Front row. Second row. People reaching out toward him. Phones raised. Hands waving. Then his eyes landed on someone who looked different. Not because she stood out, but because she didn't. While everyone around her leaned forward excitedly, one woman sat quietly with hands folded in her lap, watching. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "All right," he said slowly into the microphone. "I have a question." The band played softly behind him. Marcus pointed toward the front row. "You there?" The spotlight operator followed his gesture instantly. A bright beam landed directly on Eleanor Hayes. The crowd reacted immediately. Some laughed. Others cheered. Marcus grinned. "Well now," he said, "you look like you're grading my performance." The audience burst into laughter. Eleanor blinked in the sudden light. But she didn't panic. She simply looked up at Marcus calmly. Marcus leaned closer to the microphone. "Did someone drag you here tonight?" he joked. The crowd laughed again. "Or are you just making sure I don't mess up the lyrics?" More laughter. A few people nearby turned toward Eleanor, smiling awkwardly. They assumed she would laugh too. That she would play along. Most people did when Marcus singled them out. But Eleanor didn't react the way the crowd expected. She simply smiled politely. Then nodded once. Marcus chuckled. "Oh wow," he said. "That's a very professional nod." The crowd roared again. Marcus continued. "You know, when someone sits that still in the front row, it makes a performer nervous." He leaned slightly closer to the edge of the stage. "What's your name?" For a moment, Eleanor didn't answer. Not because she was afraid, But because she clearly hadn't planned on speaking tonight, the spotlight remained on her. Thousands of people waited. Finally, she spoke. Eleanor. Her voice was calm, but the microphone picked it up. Marcus smiled. Eleanor, he repeated. Well, Eleanor, I hope I'm passing the test. The crowd loved it, but something else was happening backstage. In a narrow hallway behind the stage, Daniel Cruz had been monitoring the audience cameras as usual. At first, the moment seemed routine. Marcus teasing another fan. Nothing unusual. But when the spotlight hit the woman's face, Daniel froze. His eyes narrowed, because suddenly, something about her looked familiar. He leaned closer to the monitor. The camera zoomed slightly. Daniel stared harder. No way, he whispered. His hand tightened around the headset resting on his shoulder. He leaned even closer to the screen. The woman in the front row tilted her head slightly as Marcus continued joking with her. That was when Daniel recognized her, and the color drained from his face. Oh no, he said quietly. He grabbed his headset. Control, he said urgently. Control, do you see the front row camera? A technician's voice crackled back. Yeah, we see it. Daniel swallowed. Zoom in. The image tightened. There was no doubt now. Daniel's heart began pounding. Because the woman sitting under the spotlight wasn't just another audience member. Not even close. She was someone whose work had shaped the careers of half the singers currently dominating the charts. Someone whose influence ran quietly through the music industry. Someone Marcus Vail should absolutely recognize. But clearly he didn't. On stage, Marcus laughed again. Well, Eleanor, he said playfully, if I mess up the next song, you can tell everyone you were here to witness the disaster. The crowd roared. Backstage, Daniel shook his head in disbelief. Marcus has no idea, he muttered. He pressed his headset again. Get the tour manager, now, he said urgently. Because if Marcus Vail kept talking, the joke he thought was harmless was about to become something very different. And by the time Marcus realized who he had just singled out, the entire arena would already be watching, waiting to see what happened next. Backstage, Daniel Cruz felt a wave of urgency rising in his chest. Because in live entertainment, there are moments that can't be reversed once they begin. Moments where the wrong sentence, the wrong spotlight, or the wrong joke can ripple through an entire room in ways no one planned. And standing in front of the monitor, Daniel knew exactly what kind of moment this was becoming. On the screen, Marcus Vail stood comfortably at the edge of the stage, still smiling at the woman in the front row. The audience laughed again as Marcus leaned slightly closer to the microphone. Well, Eleanor, he said lightly, you're being very polite about this whole thing. He rested one foot on the stage monitor. You sure you're not secretly a music critic? The crowd chuckled. Several people turned toward Eleanor again, waiting to see how she would respond. But Eleanor Hayes remained exactly as she had been all night. Calm, unbothered, almost amused. And that, more than anything else, made Daniel uneasy. Because people who were uncomfortable usually reacted. They laughed nervously. They waved the spotlight away. They covered their faces. But Eleanor Hayes simply watched. As if she had seen moments like this before. Daniel turned quickly toward a young technician working beside him. You see her? He asked. The technician glanced at the monitor. The lady Marcus is talking to? Yeah. Looks like a fan. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, she's not. The technician frowned. Then who is she? Daniel hesitated for half a second. Then he said the name quietly. Eleanor Hayes. The technician stared at the screen again. His expression didn't change. Because he didn't recognize it. But someone else did. Standing farther down the hallway, the tour manager overheard the name and turned sharply. Wait, she said. What did you just say? Daniel pointed at the monitor. That's Eleanor Hayes. The tour manager stepped closer. She studied the image. The camera zoomed slightly again as Marcus continued talking to the woman. And suddenly, the tour manager's expression changed. Oh, no, she whispered. Now she recognized her too. Because in the music industry, Eleanor Hayes was a quiet legend. Not famous in the way singers were. not visible to the public eye. But behind the scenes, her influence was enormous. For nearly 20 years, Eleanor Hayes had been the person artists turned to when they wanted their music to truly matter. She had mentored producers, advised record labels, helped shape the sound of albums that later won Grammys. And perhaps most importantly, she had been one of the first people to notice Marcus Vail when he was still performing in small clubs. Before the fame, before the tours, before the crowds. Years ago, Eleanor had quietly recommended Marcus to a producer who eventually helped launch his career. Marcus probably never even knew that part of the story, but the people backstage did, which meant the situation unfolding on stage was suddenly far more complicated than a simple audience interaction. The tour manager grabbed her headset. "Marcus," she said quickly. But the sound technician shook his head. "He's mid-bit. If you interrupt now it'll confuse him." On stage, Marcus chuckled again. "Well, Eleanor," he said playfully, "I feel like you're evaluating me." The crowd laughed. "You got that look?" he added. "You know, the one teachers give when someone forgets their homework." More laughter rippled through the audience. But Eleanor didn't react the way Marcus expected. Instead, she leaned slightly toward the microphone positioned near the edge of the stage. Her voice remained calm. "I'm enjoying the music." The room quieted slightly. Marcus grinned. "Well, that's a relief." He paused for a moment, then added with a playful shrug, "You had me worried there." The audience laughed again. Backstage, Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "This is getting worse," he muttered, because Marcus still had no idea who he was talking to. And the longer the moment stretched, the more attention it attracted. Fans began recording. Phones lifted across the arena. The spotlight remained fixed on Eleanor. Marcus leaned slightly closer again. "Tell you what," he said. "Since you're already part of the show, you should help me with the next song." The crowd erupted. They loved it when Marcus pulled audience members into the performance. But backstage, Daniel shook his head immediately. "No, no, no," he whispered. The tour manager grabbed the headset again. "Marcus, listen." But Marcus couldn't hear her clearly through the noise. "Come on," he continued into the microphone. "What do you say, Eleanor?" The crowd began chanting. "Go, go, go." Eleanor looked around the room slowly. Thousands of people are watching, waiting, and anticipating. For a moment, it looked like she might refuse. And honestly, that would have been the easiest outcome. Marcus could laugh it off. The band could start the next song. The moment would pass. But Eleanor Hayes didn't refuse. She did something no one in the room expected. She stood up. The crowd cheered immediately. Marcus clapped once. "There we go." He extended a hand toward the edge of the stage. "Come on up." Backstage, Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Because now there was no stopping it. A stagehand quickly positioned the small staircase used when fans joined Marcus during performances. Eleanor walked toward it calmly. No hesitation. No nervousness. Just quiet composure. As she reached the stage, Marcus stepped aside to give her room. The crowd roared. Marcus laughed. "All right, everybody, give Eleanor a big welcome." The applause thundered through the arena. Marcus gestured toward the microphone stand beside him. "So, Eleanor," he said casually, "do you sing?" The audience leaned forward slightly. Eleanor looked at the microphone, then back at Marcus. For the first time that evening, her smile widened slightly. "Yes," she said. Marcus laughed. "Well, that's convenient." The band members exchanged amused glances. Marcus pointed toward them. "Let's see what she's got." Backstage, Daniel whispered under his breath. "Oh man," because he knew something Marcus didn't. Something the crowd didn't know. Something that would become painfully obvious in the next few seconds. Marcus turned back toward Eleanor. "All right," he said. "Let's try something simple." He gestured to the band. "Start the intro to Forever Tonight." The guitarist began playing the opening chords. A song the entire audience knew. Marcus smiled confidently. "Just follow me." The music swelled gently through the speakers. Marcus sang the first line. The audience swayed. Then he stepped back slightly. "Your turn," he said. and handed Eleanor the microphone. For a brief moment, the entire arena fell quiet, because no one knew what was about to happen. Not the fans, not the band, and certainly not Marcus Vail. But backstage, Daniel Cruz was already shaking his head slowly, because he knew that in just a few seconds, the entire arena was about to hear something Marcus would never forget. And when that moment arrived, the joke that started this whole interaction would suddenly feel very different, because the woman standing beside Marcus Vail was not just another fan, not even close, and the first note she was about to sing would prove it. For a moment, no one in the arena moved. The band continued playing the soft opening chords of Forever, Tonight, but the energy in the room had changed completely. Marcus Vail stood beside Eleanor Hayes with an easy smile, still believing this was going to be a light-hearted moment, another audience interaction that fans would laugh about later. He had done this dozens of times before. Pulled someone from the crowd, shared a quick laugh, let them sing a line or two. The audience always loved it, but this time, something felt different. Maybe it was the way Eleanor held the microphone. Not nervously, but with the quiet familiarity of someone who had done it many times before. Marcus noticed it too. For a brief second, a small crease formed between his eyebrows. Still, he gestured toward her encouragingly. "Go ahead," he said lightly. "Your turn." The music swelled gently behind them. Thousands of people leaned forward. Phones lifted higher. The giant screens above the stage zoomed in on Eleanor's face. And then, she sang. The first note floated into the air so effortlessly that for a split second, the audience didn't even realize what had just happened. Because it wasn't the shaky voice of a nervous fan. It wasn't someone laughing their way through a joke on stage. It was something else entirely. A voice. Controlled. Rich with emotion. The kind of voice that doesn't simply ride the melody, but shapes it. Within 2 seconds, the band noticed. The guitarist looked up. The keyboard player straightened in his seat. Marcus turned his head slightly toward her. Then Eleanor continued the line. The arena fell silent. The kind of silence that only happens when thousands of people suddenly realize they're witnessing something unexpected. Marcus stared at her now. Not joking. Not smiling. Listening. Because Eleanor wasn't just singing the song. She was interpreting it. Subtle changes in phrasing. Tiny shifts in tone. Details that only someone deeply connected to the music would instinctively understand. When she reached the end of the line, the room stayed quiet for one more second. Then someone in the balcony shouted, "Whoa!" The crowd exploded into applause. Marcus blinked. He laughed softly, shaking his head. "Well, okay," he said into the microphone. "That was not what I expected." The audience laughed with him. But backstage, Daniel Cruz leaned back against the wall and exhaled slowly. Because now the moment had shifted completely. Marcus Vail turned toward Eleanor again. His voice sounded different this time. More curious. "All right," he said. "I have to ask." He tilted his head slightly. "Have you done that before?" The crowd chuckled. But Eleanor answered calmly. "Yes." Marcus laughed. "I figured." He gestured toward the audience. "You've got about 10,000 witnesses who can confirm you're pretty good." More laughter rippled through the arena. But Marcus looked closer now. Really studying her face. Because something about it, something about her voice, was starting to trigger a distant memory. The band continued playing softly behind them. Marcus leaned closer to the microphone. "All right, Eleanor," he said. "I feel like there's a story here." The audience murmured in agreement. "So what do you do?" Eleanor didn't rush to answer. She simply looked out across the crowd. Then back at Marcus. "I used to help artists with their music," she said. Marcus nodded slowly. "Like, a vocal coach?" "Sometimes." The crowd listened carefully. Marcus folded his arms. "And who exactly have you worked with?" Eleanor hesitated for just a moment. Then she gave the kind of answer that changed the entire mood in the room. "Oh, a few people," she said gently. "Aretha Franklin." The audience gasped. Marcus blinked. "Stevie Wonder." A few fans shouted in disbelief. Marcus laughed awkwardly. Okay, now you're just messing with me. Eleanor shook her head softly. No. The arena grew quieter. And a young singer from Nashville many years ago. Marcus leaned slightly closer. Who? Eleanor smiled faintly. You. For a moment, Marcus Vail didn't move. The band stopped playing. The crowd stared, because suddenly the pieces were falling into place. The tour manager stepped out from the wings. Daniel Cruz folded his arms. Marcus slowly lowered the microphone. Eleanor Hayes? The audience began murmuring. Now some people recognized the name. Others quickly searched their phones. Marcus ran a hand across the back of his neck. I guess I owe you an apology. The crowd laughed gently, but Marcus didn't rush past the moment. Instead, he turned fully toward her. His voice sincere now. Earlier tonight, I thought I was teasing a fan. He smiled sheepishly. Turns out I was teasing someone who probably knows more about music than I ever will. The audience applauded warmly. Eleanor shrugged lightly. You were just doing your job. Marcus nodded. But still, he extended a hand. Thank you for everything you did for my career. The crowd erupted again. But this time the energy felt different. Not laughter. Respect. Marcus turned back toward the band. Well, he said, I think we should finish that song properly. He looked at Eleanor. Care to join me? She smiled. And together, they sang the rest of Forever Tonight. No spotlight tricks. No jokes. Just music. When the final note faded, the applause lasted nearly a full minute. But the real moment had already happened. Because Marcus Vail had learned something that night. Something many performers forget when the spotlight becomes too familiar. Sometimes the quietest person in the room has the deepest story. After the concert ended, Eleanor slipped quietly back through the theater lobby. No crowd gathered around her. No photographers. Just the cool night air waiting outside. Marcus watched her leave from the stage door. He didn't stop her. He simply nodded respectfully as she walked past. And Eleanor Hayes disappeared into the night as quietly as she had arrived. But for everyone in that arena, the memory of that moment would stay with them. A reminder that talent doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits patiently in the front row, until the music calls it forward. And when it does, the entire room listens. So now I want to ask you something. What do you think happened that night? Do you think Marcus truly remembered Eleanor in that moment? Or did he only realize her importance after hearing her voice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you thought this story was surprising, wait until you hear what happened in the next case. Subscribe for more real-life crime twists and unbelievable stories you won't see coming.